Sometimes I feel that Sylvia Plath, Emily Dickinson, Virginia Woolf, they were all the different pages of the same book. Just the starting paragraphs are different, but end is the common. Hello and assalamu alaikum. Welcome back to my channel, and I am Mehreen. Today I am here to talk about Sylvia Plath, an American poetess who could not bear the burden of this cruel world and ended herself up in a gas oven. No words to describe her worldly achievements as a student and as a poetess. Her mental distortion started when her father died of diabetes when she was only 8 years old. After the death of her father, her mother, Aurelia, worked at 2 jobs to support Sylvia and her brother Warren. But in her diary, Plath reveals her hatred for her mother. Sylvia Plath's first awarded story, Sunday at Minton's, was published in 1952 while she was at college in magazine Mademoiselle. Plath worked in 1953 on the college editorial board at the same magazine and suffered a mental breakdown which led to a suicide attempt. She described this period of her life in The Bell Jar, her autobiographical novel. It was published under the pseudonym Victoria Lucas in 1963, a month before her death. The novel takes place in New York at the height of the Cold War during the hot summer. Against the background of Cold War, Plath sets the story of the breakdown and near death of her heroine. The book is considered a powerful exploration of the restricted role of women. Yes, restricted role of women. Sylvia Plath is a feminist poetess. The protagonists in her poems are mostly females. She talks about biological destiny of women, that how nature has committed injustice to women. In her autobiographical novel The Bell Jar, she talks about how a woman loses her virginity. In 1954 in Cambridge, she met Ted Hughes, who is also a well-known American poet. They first met at a student party where she bit Hughes on the cheek really hard. It set the tone to their tumultuous relationship. Their relationship started in violence and ended in violence. In 1956, they got married. And after the marriage, Plath decided to be a good wife. But Ted Hughes was not the ideal husband she imagined. She was moody, penchant for nose-picking and dressed slovenly. Also, Plath's suspicions of Hughes' infidelity burdened her. Plath and Ted Hughes went to England where landscape is very gloomy and sullen. In 1960, Freda was born. In the same year, she published her first edition of poetry. In 1961, there was a miscarriage, and it really had a bad effect on Sylvia Plath, being a woman. As their marriage came to an end, just before their separation, she wrote a poem, Apprehensions, in which she described the fear of infidelity. And of course, Ted Hughes ditched Sylvia Plath. Some critics call her Saint Sylvia Plath because she had been victimized by 2 males. Sylvia Plath's life is a greatest justification for her poetry. Critics think her to be the priestess of sufferings. Death in her poems is like a resurrection. To my point of view, all artists have an obsession with death. In Plath's poetry, death is also an obsession. The poem Lazarus, in which she says dying is an art. It is the art in which she wants to be master of. Of course, it is a human impulse to keep the dead in emotions. She sees her father like a god. Her father's death provided her with an obsession for the death. In her poems, she has killed herself metaphorically because she was not accustomed to enjoy life in a real sense. Resurrection for her is a male domain, but she has impulse to be alive from the ashes of death. It is her desire to be resurrected and consummate her father and Ted Hughes. There is an urgency in her poems. She seems to have the view that life and death are challenges. Main themes in her poems are death and resurrection or transformation. Although her poetry got attention and admiration in its own right, Sylvia Plath owes much of her popularity to her journals. These journals were a sort of personal diary maintained by her, which first saw the light of the day 19 years after her death, with a volume edited and published by her husband, the celebrated poet Ted Hughes. Some of the details about her never quite happy life were already known. Ted Hughes had already won ill reputation as a bad husband. Whenever Ted Hughes went for the public readings of his poetry, they were often disrupted with cries of murderer, murderer. The matter was a sort of heated debate with as many arguments on Hughes' side as against him. But no amount of reason can prove that Hughes was a good husband to Plath. Quite alarming details of his beastly treatment of Plath had already leaked out before Plath's death. His involvement with Assia Wevel was no secret. On the female side, at least, he was unanimously declared a villain. All his frantic efforts to wash his reputation clean failed to achieve the purpose. It was mainly for this purpose that in 1982 he published an edited collection of Plath's journals. The publication brought on another more violent spate of criticism, for it was believed that the editing had scissored all the juicy stuff out. The suspicion was not entirely baseless. Later on, Ted Hughes admitted that he had to leave out details that might have hurt their two kids, Freda and Nicholas. The excuse was not considered good enough. People believed that much more than such details had been left out to save the editor's own reputation. This collection brought much of Plath's mind and her poetry closer to view. Some of the enigmas pertaining to her poetry were resolved. Some of the poems got an entirely new interpretation. But curiosity to see the whole bulk of these revealing autobiographical notes started clamoring more loudly. At last, the unabridged journals were published by Faber and Faber. Through the efforts of Plath's own kids, their father had by now learnt not to stand in their way. And finally, this complete, unexpurgated volume of the journals integrated the maddeningly fragmented image of Sylvia Plath into a complete picture. In the last few months of her life, she wrote her most widely acclaimed poem, Daddy. In this poem, she alluded to her first attempt at suicide at the age of 20, saying, "At 20, I tried to die, but they pulled me out of the sack. and they stuck me together with glue. Her second attempt on January 7, 1963 was successful, but the popularity of her works and curiosity about her life again got her stuck together in paper form. Tons of paper went into the publication of her works, journals, and comments on her life and art. The journals are a window to her sufferings. This was a brief introduction of Sylvia Plath and her life and her sufferings. In the upcoming videos, I am definitely going to discuss the most important and most famous works from Sylvia Plath. So stay tuned with me, keep waiting for my videos, keep sharing my videos, and thanks for being with Mehreen for such a long time.